The notification hit my phone at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, and that was my brother's first mistake. My brother never texted me that late unless he needed something. "Hey, big news. Call me." I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of my studio apartment, laptop balanced on a stack of programming books, debugging a crash loop in the property listing sync feature I'd been wrestling with for 6 days. My coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago. I had a 6 a.m. shift at the café the next morning. My back hurt. My eyes burned. There was a chip in my kitchen tile I'd been meaning to report to my landlord for 4 months and hadn't, because calling my landlord felt like one task too many, on top of everything else I was carrying. I almost didn't call back. I should have trusted that instinct. "Sara," my brother said when he picked up, his voice carrying that particular warmth he only deployed when he wanted something. "I've been thinking about your app." My app? NeighborStack. 3 years of my life compressed into 72,000 lines of code, built entirely in the margins of my actual life, before shifts, after shifts, on weekends, during holidays, during the 2 weeks I'd spent recovering from a minor surgery and had nothing to do but lie in bed and code. A property management platform designed for small landlords and neighborhood associations. It had features the big competitors hadn't thought to build. Hyperlocal maintenance request routing, tenant communication logs with timestamps and photo attachments, shared amenity scheduling with conflict resolution. Nothing that would make headlines. Everything that made the difference between a landlord managing 4 properties feeling overwhelmed and feeling in control. I'd quietly onboarded 10 beta users the previous spring. Within 60 days, 3 of them had stopped using 2 different competitors. "What about it?" I asked carefully. "I showed it to some people," my brother said. I went very still. "Which people?" "The Caldwell Group." "Marcus Caldwell. You know who he is?" I did. Marcus Caldwell was a private equity investor who'd made his first fortune in commercial real estate and spent the last 3 years loudly publicizing his search for prop-tech opportunities. He'd been quoted in 3 trade publications I followed. "He's been looking to invest in this space for 2 years, my brother continued. "I set up a demo. He's very interested. We're talking a first meeting Thursday. You demoed my app," I said slowly. "Without asking me. Sara, you've been sitting on this for 3 years. You need capital. I have the connections you don't. I did you a favor. How did you get access to the demo environment?" A pause. "You left yourself logged in on the family laptop at Christmas." I just showed them the interface. The family laptop. That laptop that lived in my parents' den that I used when I was home for the holidays. That I had, apparently, failed to log out of last December. "I need to be in that meeting," I said. "Obviously," my brother said. "Get some sleep. You sound exhausted." He hung up before I could say anything else. I told myself it was fine. My brother was impulsive. He acted first and coordinated later. But he was my brother. We'd grown up in the same house. He knew NeighborStack was mine. He wouldn't actually try to. I stopped that thought before I finished it, because even then, in my apartment that smelled like cold coffee and takeout containers, something in the back of my mind was already drawing lines between points I didn't want to connect. Thursday arrived the way bad days always do, bright, ordinary, completely unsuspecting of what it was about to become. The Caldwell Group occupied the 14th floor of a building downtown. All glass walls and neutral tones, and the particular hush of serious money. I arrived wearing the blazer I'd ironed twice and a pair of slacks I'd borrowed from my friend Jenna because my good pair had a coffee stain I'd never managed to lift. I carried my laptop, a folder of printed pitch materials I'd assembled in 48 sleepless hours, and a flash drive with the full demo build. My parents were already in the conference room. That was the first moment I should have turned and walked back to the elevator. My parents attended baseball games, school fundraisers, my father's firm Christmas parties, and Thanksgiving. They did not attend business meetings for apps they'd barely asked about. My mother had once described NeighborStack as Sarah's little project, with the same affectionate condescension she'd used to describe my 7th grade pottery class. They were sitting on one side of a long conference table. My brother was at the head of it, in a suit that cost more than 2 months of my rent, looking completely at ease. 3 men in their mid-50s sat across from him, the Caldwell Group. Everyone looked up when I walked in. "Here she is," my brother said, with the careful warmth of a man introducing a supporting character. My sister Sara. She helped me build out the prototype in the early stages. The word helped landed in my sternum like something dropped from a height. It's my platform, I said, setting my laptop bag on the table. I'm the developer. I've been building NeighborStack for 3 years. I have the codebase, the documentation, and a provisional patent filing. My father cleared his throat once. Just once. Just my name hovering unspoken in the air. The register he used in public when he needed me to understand that we would discuss it later, and right now I needed to stop. One of the Caldwell men smiled in the polished, vacant way of someone whose mind was already made up. Tyler mentioned you'd been involved in early concept development. Very impressive for someone who he glanced at something on the table. Something my brother had clearly given them in advance. A bio sheet. A one-pager works in hospitality. I'm a software developer, I said. I work at a café to pay rent while I build this company. The man nodded with the smile still in place, already scrolling past me internally. My brother had gotten there first. He'd told them his version. And they were men who were built to trust confident men in expensive suits, not tired women in borrowed slacks, who smelled faintly of espresso. The meeting ended without resolution, or, rather, with polite language about circling back and scheduling a follow-up once all parties had aligned. My brother stayed to shake hands. My parents stayed to exchange pleasantries. I took the elevator down alone and stood on the sidewalk in the October wind and understood, with a clarity that felt like swallowing ice, exactly what was happening. By the time my brother and my parents arrived at my apartment that evening, I had printed out NeighborStack's full commit history from GitHub. 47 pages, every push to the repository, every file modification, every timestamp going back 3 years and 2 months to the night I'd registered the repo and written my first real function. My username, my verified email address, GitHub's server-generated timestamps that no one could edit because they lived on infrastructure I'd never touched, and neither had anyone in my family. My brother walked in, saw the papers spread across my kitchen table, and his face did something that lasted less than a second before he covered it. "This is dramatic," he said. "Is it?" I tapped the first page. 2,347 commits. 3 years of my work. Every file change logged by GitHub servers with my credentials. I pulled another paper from the folder. I also filed a provisional patent application in March. 8 months ago, my name, my application number, the USPTO's filing timestamp. I have the confirmation email. My mother sat on my couch without being invited and folded her hands in her lap with the stillness of a woman who'd already been briefed on what was about to happen. My father stood near the door. He was a commercial real estate attorney. He'd spent 30 years in rooms where people argued about ownership and leverage and documentation. He looked at my papers with the expression of someone calculating. "Sara," he said, "what you have there is a paper trail that shows you wrote some code. What it doesn't show is a viable business. You have 10 beta users. You have a prototype that hasn't scaled. The Caldwell Group isn't handing a 7-figure check to someone who takes orders at a coffee counter. They're handing it to Tyler, because Tyler speaks their language and has their trust and can run the operation at a level you currently can't." He let that settle. "What we're proposing is actually fair. You'll receive a salary, a real one, benefits. 2 years from now, when the company is worth something substantial, you'll benefit from that." "You want me to sign away my own invention?" I said. "So my brother can take credit for it." "We want you to be practical," my mother said softly. "Sometimes, being practical means letting the right person lead." "The right person," I said. "He hasn't written a single line of code in his life." "He doesn't need to," my father said. "He needs to lead. You need to decide whether you want to be right or whether you want to be compensated." I looked at my brother. He was leaning against my kitchen counter with his arms crossed, watching the conversation with the patience of someone who knew the outcome. He'd been the right person his whole life. Right for the starting lineup, right for the internship, right for the partnership track. Right for every room he walked into while I was in the margins, writing code that would apparently now bear his name. "I'm not signing anything," I said. My brother uncrossed his arms. He glanced at my laptop, which was open on the counter next to him, the GitHub repo still visible on the screen. He glanced at the glass of water sitting beside it. My water, in my glass. He picked it up I want to say I saw what was coming. I didn't. Even then, even knowing everything I knew about who he was, I didn't believe he would actually. He poured it. Slowly. The entire glass, tilted with deliberate care, directly onto my keyboard. The screen flickered, went black, a thin curl of something electrical and final. No one in the room moved or made a sound. Clumsy, my brother said, setting the empty glass on the counter. He didn't look at me. The printouts got wet, my father observed, nodding at the soggy commit history pages bleeding ink into each other. I looked at my mother. She was looking at the window. No code, my brother said pleasantly. No proof. The document is on the table. Sign it, Sara, and you'll come out of this with a real income and a real future. More than this place is giving you. My father placed the IP transfer agreement on my wet kitchen table. I didn't pick it up. I already knew what it said. That I, Sara Harmon, confirmed that my brother Tyler Harmon had originated the concept and core architecture of NeighborStack, that my contributions had been limited to collaborative development support, and that I hereby transferred all intellectual property rights to Harmon Family Holdings, LLC. You have until Monday, my father said. They left one by one. My mother touched my shoulder at the door, a gesture so reflexive it meant nothing. The door closed. I stood in my apartment alone with my ruined laptop and wet papers and the faint smell of electrical damage, and I hit what I can only describe as the absolute floor of things, the place you find when the people who are supposed to know you best make it quietly clear, without cruelty and without remorse, that you are simply worth less to them than a deal. I sat down on the kitchen floor. I sat there for a long time in the dark. Then I called Jenna, not to cry, though I did cry, briefly, into the phone, which she was gracious enough to absorb without comment. I called Jenna because Jenna had a laptop and lived 6 blocks away, and I needed to think, and I thought better when I was moving. Here is what Tyler had not understood about me, because he had never been curious enough to learn. I don't think in terms of what exists in the room in front of me. I think in terms of systems, redundancy, fail-safes. When I built NeighborStack, the very first thing I configured before I wrote a single line of functional code was automatic email notifications for every GitHub commit, routed to 2 separate inboxes. My primary email and a secondary Gmail I used exclusively for archiving and backup. Every push to the repo generated a notification. Every notification lived in 2 places. Tyler had destroyed my laptop. Destroying a laptop destroys exactly 1 copy of whatever was stored locally. It does nothing to servers. GitHub's servers still held the entire repository. My account, my verified credentials, every commit, every timestamp, all of it accessible from any device with a browser. The code had never lived only on my machine. That's not how version control works. That's the entire point of version control. The patent confirmation email was in my primary inbox, auto-archived to a Gmail folder I'd labeled Legal Important, which was synced to Google Drive, which was accessible from any computer anywhere. I borrowed Jenna's laptop at midnight. I opened GitHub. The repository was there, untouched. Every commit intact. The history reading like a diary entry of 3 years of my life written in the language I thought in. I opened Gmail, found the patent email. March 8th. My name. My application number. A USPTO filing timestamp no one could alter because it lived in the federal government's database. Then I found the other thing. The thing Tyler genuinely hadn't anticipated, because he hadn't been thorough enough when he accessed my demo environment to understand what he was walking into. When I'd set up NeighborStack's beta testing, I'd enabled session recording for all demo accounts to capture UX behavior, a common practice for product research. When my brother logged into the test account I'd created and ran his demo for the Caldwell group, my app had recorded his session, his IP address, his timestamps, his navigation through the product, the exact sequence of features he demonstrated. Logged in my backend's activity database. My brother had pitched my product to investors. My product had watched him do it and stored the receipts. I called Miss Chen on a Friday morning. I'd found her through a legal aid referral, an IP attorney who specialized in tech startup disputes. I explained the situation. She listened without interrupting, which told me she'd heard versions of this story before, dressed in different clothes. "Send me everything," she said. I sent the commit history. the patent filing, the session recording logs, the back-end activity data, the original test account credentials my brother had used without my knowledge. She came back in 4 hours. We have what we need. When do you want to move? I thought about this carefully. My family expected me to spend the weekend frightened and isolated, arriving on Monday hollowed out and ready to sign. I needed them in the right room, still believing they'd won. When I removed the floor, my father had organized what he called a family meeting for Sunday afternoon. The IP transfer document would be on the coffee table. There would be a pen. I arrived at my parents' house at 2 p.m., with Jenna's laptop in my bag. My parents were in the living room. My brother was leaning against the fireplace with his arms crossed, wearing the expression of a man enjoying the ending of a story he'd written himself. The document was on the coffee table with a pen beside it, exactly as I'd expected. "Sara," my mother said, warm and carefully sad. "Come sit down." "In a second," I said. I set Jenna's laptop on the coffee table, right on top of the document. "First, I need to show you something." "We're not here to look at anything," my brother said. "We've been very patient, and it's time to—" "Tyler," I said. "Do you know what a git commit history is?" He stared at me. "It's a log," I said. "A permanent server-side log of every change ever made to a codebase. Who made the change? When? From what account? With what credentials? It's how software developers prove authorship." I opened the laptop and turned it to face the room. "This is NeighborStack's commit history. The earliest entry is September 14th, 3 years ago. My username, my verified email address, 2,347 commits, every single one attributed to my account." I paused to let them look. "You destroyed my laptop. You didn't touch the server." My brother's posture shifted. Something recalculated behind his eyes. "There's also this." I clicked to the next tab. The patent filing, clean and official and time-stamped by the federal government. Provisional patent application, March 8th, 8 months before the Caldwell meeting. My name. My application number. Filed in the USPTO's database, which is not something anyone in this room has the ability to alter. I turned the laptop toward my father specifically, because my father was a lawyer and would understand before anyone else what he was looking at. He read it. His expression didn't change, but something behind it did. "And this," I said, clicking again. "When you accessed my demo environment through the family laptop, Tyler, you logged in through a test account I'd created for beta users. That account session was recorded. My backend logs your IP address, your timestamps, and every single thing you did in my app to prepare for that pitch." I let him digest that. "You used my product to steal my product. My product documented it." My brother opened his mouth, closed it. "Miss Chen, my attorney, sent a cease and desist to the Caldwell Group on Friday morning," I said. "They've been informed that the IP presented to them belongs to me, that the presenter was not the inventor, and that proceeding with any deal structured around Tyler's claimed ownership will expose them to significant legal liability." A copy also went to the State Bar Association, noting my father's indirect involvement in the pressure campaign for their records. The living room was quiet. Not the polite quiet of a paused conversation. The absolute quiet of a room where 3 people have simultaneously understood that they are no longer holding the hand they thought they held. My father picked up the cease and desist document I slid across the coffee table. Miss Chen had written it precisely and thoroughly. He read every page. His face as he read it was the face of a man doing arithmetic he didn't like the sum of. My mother was looking at my brother. For the first time in my memory, she was looking at him the way she had always looked at me. "You told us she had nothing left," she said quietly. "You told us the laptop was everything." "She didn't have anything," my brother said, and his voice was controlled, but something underneath it was not. "She had a dead laptop and some wet papers. How was I supposed to know she used version control?" "Because she's a software developer," my father said, flatly, and the words seemed to cost him something. He set the cease and desist down and sat very still for a moment. "Tyler," just his name, in a voice I'd never heard my father use before. Not the low register of authority or the easy register of approval. Something without a floor. My brother pushed off the fireplace and crossed toward me with an expression I recognized. Not anger, exactly, but the look he'd worn my whole life when I had something he wanted, and he was deciding how to take it. I got you that meeting. You never would have been in that room without me. You're a developer, Sara, not a business person. You'd still be beta testing 10 landlords in 5 years. Maybe, I said. But it would still be mine. The meeting with Marcus Caldwell happened on Tuesday. I want to be honest with you. I was terrified. I walked into that same 14th floor conference room in the same blazer and the same borrowed slacks, sat across from the same men. And this time, I was entirely alone. No family behind me, no script, no safety net. Just me and 3 years of work and Miss Chen on the phone in my pocket if I needed her. I spoke for 40 minutes. Caldwell and his team asked questions for 20 more, not surface questions. Technical questions, market questions, questions about retention data and scaling architecture and competitive differentiation. Questions my brother could not have answered on his best day, because my brother had never actually used NeighborStack. He'd watched me describe it at Christmas dinner 2 years ago, the way you watch a movie on an airplane present but not really paying attention, and filed it away. At the end of it, Marcus Caldwell leaned back in his chair and said, "What do you need to get this to market in 18 months? I had the number ready. I'd had it ready for 2 years, in a spreadsheet I updated every quarter, because I'd always planned for this moment. I just hadn't expected to arrive at it this way. The term sheet came through Thursday. Not the 7 figures my brother had dangled. Somewhat more than that, contingent on standard milestones and structured across 2 tranches, which was appropriate and which I understood because I'd spent 6 months reading every term sheet I could find online. I want to tell you it felt like triumph. What it actually felt like was the moment after a very long illness, when the fever breaks, and you are weak and clear-eyed, and the world is exactly the same world, but you are seeing it without the distortion of heat. Everything sharp. Everything slightly strange in its sharpness. My brother and I have not spoken since that Sunday afternoon. My parents called me the following week. My father sounded like a man I'd never met, older and quieter, and without the armor of certainty he'd worn my whole life. He said he was sorry for how things unfolded, he said, which is different from being sorry for what he did, but was more than I'd expected. My mother asked me to think about family. I am thinking about family. I'm thinking about it every day. I'm thinking about what the word means when the people who use it do so, the way my brother used it as a claim, a lever, a reason why what's mine should become what's theirs. I signed a lease on a real apartment, the kind with a separate room for an office and windows that face east and a landlord I have no personal connection to. I bought a new laptop. Not refurbished. I hired 2 developers whose names I knew before I hired them, because I'd been following their GitHub profiles for years. I gave notice at the café on a Wednesday morning, in the middle of my shift. Not out of anger, I'd loved that café. Loved the regulars, loved the ritual of it, but because I had somewhere else to be. The code had always been there. Patient, time-stamped, server-side and untouchable, and mine. My brother thought he could take it by destroying what he could see. He didn't understand that the most important things I'd ever built couldn't be reached by anything he held in his hands. I was in the driver's seat. I didn't look back.